First story, I plucked up enough self-confidence to approach Kate, my lifelong crush. After deciding to get coffee, our 3 fantastic dates evolved into something much more. We subsequently bonded as a couple and made our relationship official. Over the next 7 months, our relationship blossomed into something like a fairy tale. Our shared interests were immense, and we seldom ever thought differently. We were quite honest with each other, including in our most private times. We had an extraordinary bed life. Furthermore, we both had nice careers, so we could treat each other without concern for money. Ultimately, the support and encouragement we received from both our families towards our relationship were overwhelmingly positive and heartening. And then something significant occurred in January of 2017. I was approved as a combat engineer into the Armed Forces Reserve program of my nation. Enduring basic training, which ended up being the hardest thing I had ever done, from February until late April. There were times when I didn't think I would survive, but Kate's supportive messages and phone calls got me through. Upon receiving my BTC certificate, her unwavering presence and continuous expressions of pride served as a constant source of reassurance and support. As an integral part of my reserve duties, I was tasked with attending advanced training sessions throughout the summer, a commitment that demanded utmost dedication and effort. Stretching from early June until late August, the experience was anything but lighthearted. Throughout the entirety of this period, Kate remained steadfastly supportive, demonstrating unwavering commitment. She wholeheartedly endorsed my journey of 400 kilometers to the training center, even at the cost of sacrificing the majority of our summer holiday. Recognizing the paramount importance of my military progression, she stood by my decision. Allow me to elaborate. That summer was an arduous ordeal. I found myself isolated, feeling like a complete outsider amidst the various cliques that emerged within our course. Being the constant target of jokes took a toll on my self-esteem, causing it to plummet. However, do you know what kept me moving forward? It was Kate's unflinching faith in me. She believed in my ability to persevere, and against all odds, I accomplished just that. I successfully made it through as the 5th top performer in the course, and I attribute every ounce of that achievement to her support and encouragement. She said that once we got back home, our relationship worsened. My spontaneity and outgoing demeanor seemed to have vanished compared to my previous self before I departed. I grew dismissive, saw light jokes for personal attacks, and favored remaining at home to watch movies and seek proximity over going out. Unbeknownst to us, the summer had left me grappling with severe social anxiety, a hidden burden that began to strain our relationship. As our 2-year anniversary in 2018 approached, a heated argument over a trivial misunderstanding escalated, ultimately leading to our separation. She broke up with me, which saddened me, but 3 days later, she texted me to say she wanted to get back together. Though we didn't see one another for 3 weeks, we continued to communicate often and worked to gradually mend the harm. But when we formally reconciled, something didn't feel right. Our already delicate relationship was further harmed by the fact that every conversation we had seemed like we were treading carefully, which made me anxious. All of these tensions finally reached a boiling point around the end of July. Kate once ran across this man named John when she was still a student. It turned out that she saw in John what she had once recognized in me, and they bonded instantly to become close friends. He turned to become her confidant during our split and in the aftermath when I made mistakes. I knew John existed, just so you know, but I never imagined Kate would ever become involved with him. We had arranged for me to crash at Kate's apartment one evening after work. Upon arriving, I noticed that they were both lounging on the living room couch. After John left, Kate explained that things took a turn, despite his brief visit and imminent departure. Suddenly, she grew distant and icy in demeanor. I eventually realized that our relationship was barely hanging on. Summoning all my courage, I dared to inquire about the state of affairs. The following day, upon realizing that she harbored similar sentiments, we mutually agreed to bring our relationship to an end. Despite the circumstances, she allowed me to spend one more night, as it was getting late, and she still harbored some concern for my well-being. Kate became especially connected to and protective of her phone after that, and she fell asleep with it. In the past, she didn't mind if I caught a peek of her and her buddies texting about various topics, however, now she tries to cover the device. I questioned her regarding it, and she brushed it off as confidential, which only fueled my growing suspicion further. Curiosity overcame me once she fell asleep. I found myself unable to resist the temptation of unlocking her phone, armed with the knowledge of her passcode. What I stumbled upon shook me to my very core. There were hundreds of texts between her and John, talking about how she was suddenly single. They were thrilled by the idea that they could finally go public with their relationship, feeling a rush of excitement at the thought, and, worst of all, ridiculing me for everything I did. It turns out that my sobbing wasn't as discreet as I believed. Kate suddenly woke up, catching me red-handed. Instantly, she erupted in anger, throwing a fit. I was too startled and overwhelmed to be angry or find the correct words to respond. So I just grabbed my bags and went out. Kate was in tears, shouting at me relentlessly throughout the whole ordeal. By the time I reached home, it was the early hours of the morning. I completely shattered emotionally and sobbed uncontrollably throughout the entire night, displaying my most unattractive emotions. I called in sick to be absent from work and spent the entire day lying in my bed, unable to muster the energy to face the world. The day after that hectic night, my phone was flooded with angry texts from Kate's friends and relatives, all aimed at discrediting me and protecting her reputation. In a frantic attempt to defend her own image and undermine anything I said about her, she proceeded to inform everyone she knew that I had forced myself on her that night, twisting the events to protect her own image. According to her warped version of events, I apparently tried to acquire someone before we broke up, and after I had what I wanted, I ran away. She asserted that my actions had traumatized her, yet she conveniently opted not to pursue legal charges, fearing a public spectacle in court would disrupt her life. In her perspective, she viewed herself as demonstrating greater maturity by opting against taking legal action. Over the following months, I resided in perpetual apprehension, fearing that her baseless accusations could lead to my dismissal from the army and inflict lasting harm on my reputation. However, it turned out to be all for naught. It was merely an illusion. Around 5 months later, Kate initiated contact through direct messages. Following some initial pleasantries, she proceeded to offer an apology for the entire debacle and even admitted to fabricating the accusations. Nevertheless, she adamantly stated her refusal to publicly acknowledge her deception, prioritizing the safeguarding of her own reputation over mine. Despite my seething anger, I managed to maintain composure. I meticulously documented our conversation as evidence and continued to interact with her over the ensuing 3 months. During this period, she fell into a behavior which can be predictable. It typically involved venting about her current relationship woes with John and soliciting my counsel. She would immediately begin reminiscing about our previous relationship, emphasizing how I never made mistakes like John did and expressing a wish to return to the way things were, and so on. However, her demeanor abruptly shifted when John made a romantic gesture, prompting her to ignore me. Subsequently, she would discredit me on social media, garnering encouragement from her friends to provoke me into conflict. Her tactics succeeded in painting me as the villain in our exchanges. Following this, she would block me for approximately a month, only to repeat the entire cycle multiple times, leaving me emotionally drained and shattered each time. However, there was a curious part of me that welcomed its return each time it occurred. I was careful to grab screenshots of every incriminating comment she made. As a result, I possessed a complete SD card teeming with all the evidence I had meticulously gathered, signifying that it was time for me to act. I proceeded to create several copies of the most heinous texts I had recorded. As a result, I purchased many manila envelopes and sent them to everyone I considered important to Kate, her parents, grandparents, immediate extended family, best friends, her workplace, coworkers, and even her teachers. I looked up every postal address I could locate. It was of paramount importance to me that anyone who received those envelopes comprehended that the contents were discussions between Kate and me. I dispatched the envelopes, keeping that in mind, after sealing them. I started noticing improvements after just 3 weeks. The same folks were suddenly apologizing to me through messages that had before included deplorable remarks. From Kate's own parents, I found my favorite apology. They admitted that they had nurtured their daughter to aspire to better behavior than what she had exhibited and expressed their heartfelt sorrow over her actions. They begged me to hold off on taking any legal action. I had thought about it for a moment, but I lacked the means and the will to fight for what I believed in. I assured them that they would be the primary recipients of any decision regarding legal action, along with Kate, and that I would carefully consider their request. Kate also texted me a few times. She yelled things like, "You destroyed my life, you scoundrel, and how could you betray my trust?" I read every furious message that was sent in instead of responding, and once the letters ceased, I felt satisfied. I proceeded to block her. I never truly knew how much my retaliation had harmed her life in the end, but I knew that she lost her job and dropped out of school. I questioned whether she truly thought John was worth it. Second story. I am a 46-year-old man who has been married for 22 years. My two boys are 16 and 20 years old. Aside from the typical problems that arise in marriage, my 46-year-old wife and I have experienced nothing unusual. But this year, I began to notice some behavioral changes in her. For example, she stopped taking the pill a few years ago and started taking it again in March. I hadn't observed any manifestations indicative of menopause, but she said it helped with those. She's also started purchasing more elegant underwear, so I assumed it could have something to do with my recent work change and increased pay. She has also been leaving abruptly and without much notice. Individually, these things may not be too concerning, but when you look at them together, it definitely piqued my interest, to say the least. While each of these items might not seem very alarming on their own, when combined, they certainly caught my attention. Anyway, until around 2 weeks ago, nothing unusual had happened, even though I had sensed something wasn't right. I was a little concerned when my wife requested to speak with me when she got home. When I inquired about her situation, she answered, "I want to attend the X-Tex concert, and the opportunity has presented itself." In response, I said, "Wow, you've been dying to see X. Proceed now. With whom are you traveling?" At that moment, she dropped a bombshell. She was attending with a male friend she had known for a long time. Initially, he had intended to attend with his daughter, but she was unable to join. As my wife told me this, she looked guilty, but I pretended not to care and added, "Wish you a wonderful time." However, I secretly hoped that I could learn more before the show. They attended the performance, enjoyed themselves, and shared a few photos on social media. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I conducted some research and was able to get the guy's identity. But to be honest, I didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to piece together what was happening. For 6 weeks, the fools had been going on runs together, always on the same routes, at the same intervals. As I said before, it wasn't directly related, but it wasn't hard to figure out. Adding to the complexity, this jerk, whom I'll refer to as Gary, maintained an active presence on Facebook that was accessible to the public and was clearly ridiculing me there. IIT wasn't solely my sensitivity at play. It was evident that this arrogant jerk considered himself more intelligent and superior to others. So, armed with that information, I took some moments for contemplation. Typically, my intentions altered instantly since. Later that same afternoon, an opportunity to inspect my wife's phone arose. I'd never done that before in our whole relationship, and sure enough, I discovered 6 months' worth of explicit texts, videos, and the entire affair between her and Gary. I'm normally a laid-back man who rarely loses his cool, and this circumstance was no exception. I was in disbelief, overcome with sadness, and had no comprehension of what was happening. I uncovered the truth on Wednesday, and our conversation extended until Friday, during which she displayed no remorse and persistently professed her feelings for him. That was the breaking point for me. She not only cheated on me, but she didn't appear to care, so we started talking about splitting up. It's been challenging because we had to wait for a few weeks for one of our boys to complete an essential scholastic term. I was reluctant to disrupt that, hence we maintained the facade of normalcy until June 22nd. We're still going through that game, and let me tell you, it's been a complete nightmare for me. At the very least, there is more to the narrative. I was out for a stroll the next Friday and happened to go past his house without giving it much thought. I got into a confrontation with him after knocking on his door. It was highly unusual behavior for me because, throughout my adult life, I have never been offensive to anyone. Though it wasn't intended, I do wonder now why I wound up at his house. I threatened to make public all the messages I had saved on social media if he involved law enforcement, so we didn't call the police. It worked, and there were no further consequences. But, to be honest, I wouldn't have carried through with the threat because of my boys. 1 week later, and from an external perspective, we look to be a regular couple. But within, I'm filled with rage and fury, and I've begun making arrangements to divorce our long-term marriage. Basically, once we tell our boys, she'll go. Anything like has never happened to me before, and I sincerely hope it never does. To be honest, I have no idea what to do or where to start from minute to minute. There exists within me a fragment wants to injure him and get revenge. but ever since I spoke with him, I've been more composed. I recognize that's not a good idea, but to be honest, experiencing the satisfaction of confronting him physically felt immensely gratifying, thus indicating my current stance. I know every detail of every intricate aspect of the affair since she saved the whole chat thread, including their intimate moments, favorites, times of day, and locations. I know everything. Third story, I am 28 years old, and my relationship with my girlfriend, aged 25, has lasted approximately 2 years. Before she revealed the shocking news that she is pregnant, everything in our relationship seemed to be going well. She said she was on birth control, and I've always been cautious, but I had my suspicions. I went with her to an appointment, believing it was only a false alarm. The fact that I had always wanted to establish a family made me joyful despite the unforeseen circumstances. She pushed on moving in with me as the first trimester went on, which I now see was a warning sign I ignored. We started planning our work schedules and arranging the baby's room. She was certain that she could work while staying at home with her children. I went to every prenatal checkup with her, and everything appeared well between us. Now that the third trimester has arrived, I've been able to rearrange my schedule so that I can still go to all of the prenatal appointments. Until recently, I had been there throughout each appointment. On the other hand, my girlfriend requested me to wait outside during a certain visit so she could talk to the doctor. She preferred I remained unaware that there may be a problem with the baby, which greatly scared me. When I arrived, the checkup had already been completed, and everything appeared to be in order. However, my partner downplayed my worries about missing the entire appointment as if it didn't matter, which was another red flag. The due date is in approximately 6 weeks, and as that time approaches, I start to notice that my partner is more resilient when it comes to her phone conversations and messages. When I inquire about it, she says it is work-related and confidential. I attempt to get a quick glance at her phone since this makes me suspicious. I find it strange that she uses Kik and Snapchat, but I choose not to question her about it. At last, the baby is born, and I am overwhelmed with emotion. The infant is wonderful, and the birth went off without a hitch. However, they then want me to sign my name on the birth certificate. My partner begins to insistently urge me to do so, displaying more anxiety than I've ever witnessed from her. This heightened behavior serves as a clear warning sign to me. Despite her persistent demands, I refuse, leading to an argument between us. She eventually ceases her insistence on the matter, likely due to realizing the suspicion it raises. Now that we're back home, she has to tend to the recently awakened baby. I noticed her setting her phone down as she attended to the infant. Yielding to temptation, I decided to take a peek. Surprisingly, her phone remained unlocked. I began scouring for any messages or calls that might raise suspicion, and indeed I stumbled upon a lengthy Kik conversation with a man. They discussed her appointments and exchanged pictures of her and the baby. Then I stumbled upon something alarming, the part where she expressed her belief that the baby belonged to him. When I confronted her about it, she offered an apology. While she admits that the baby could be fathered by someone else or by me, she remains convinced that the child is mine. I made the decision to walk out after demanding a paternity test. Our encounter was about a week ago. Yesterday, I received the results of the paternity test, which revealed the kid is not mine. Now residing with her mother, here's the intriguing twist. My investigation was quite extensive, given that all I had were the usernames of the individuals she communicated with. The baby's father is her supervisor, a married guy with 4 middle and high school-aged children. Through various methods, I managed to find his wife on Facebook. I shared with her all the evidence I had gathered, which included messages from my girlfriend admitting that the baby belongs to her husband. I'm devastated in a lot of different ways. I realize I am lucky in some ways, yet I am terribly saddened. This entire incident has really altered my outlook on things. After that, I feel resentful, furious, and unwilling to trust anyone. She constantly attempts to get in touch with me, but I'm not sure if it's because she loves me or for some other reason. In any case, I'm not inclined to engage in a conversation with her at the moment. Now, let's delve into the identity of the biological father. I reached out to his wife regarding the matter. She did not answer immediately. Eventually, my former partner informed me that he had lost his job. It feels like there is some justice in the world. He believes my ex is responsible for the situation he's currently in and wants no involvement with her. The guy's wife contacted me more than a week later. She apologized for everything I had gone through. Her shock had not worn off, I believe. I don't know where he went when she had him ejected. The problem has been made public, so their children are aware of it. My ex-girlfriend is still working at the same location, but she is actively seeking a new job now that everyone is aware of what transpired. I remain deeply shocked and devastated by these recent problems. The upcoming holiday season looms with difficulty and a pervasive sense of melancholy. Nonetheless, I hold on to the belief that hope exists and that eventual improvement is possible. The aftermath of this ordeal has left me profoundly shaken, and the timeline for my emotional recovery remains uncertain. I find myself inclined to renounce any future involvement in relationships altogether.